Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was ignored for his twin but became the harem king of Konoha? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It sure is dark in here. A 6-year-old Naruto thought briskly as he stared dully out of his bedroom window towards the rest of Konohagakure no Sato proper. Drumming his fingers on the windowsill, he sighed as his eyes traveled towards to the Namikaze training grounds below, watching his parents Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki train his twin sister, Naomi Uzumaki Namikaze. I wonder if there's anything to eat, he thought, getting up from his bed and made his way to the fridge when the side door burst open, the sound of laughter permeating the estate. Naruto continued to look bored as he rummaged about the fridge, when the rest of his family came in. Good job, Naomi. You'll kick the other Genin's butt in no time, Kushina said ecstatically. Minato smiled and ruffled her orange hair, congratulating her as well. Since your birthday is coming up, I'll teach you one of my signature techniques, the Rasengan. Minato said, watching Naomi's eyes widen in excitement. Really? Two-san. She started to hop in place, flailing her arms as Minato and Kushina laughed. Naruto rolled his eyes and nabbed a sandwich before closing the fridge. He made his way upstairs until he heard Naomi's voice again, calling out to him. Look Naruto ni, Two-san's teaching me the Rasengan. She smiled a pleasant smile, while Naruto continued to look bored as he stared at her, disinterested. Her smile lessened a bit. Why can't you be more like me, Ni-san? Maybe then you'll have some actual friends, she said, mockingly. All she got was another disinterested stare, which made her shiver a bit. His cold blue eyes stared deep into her own, a silent threat to her being which she ignored. Minato and Kushina, who were watching from the sidelines, quickly wrapped their arms around her and spun her around. Don't talk to him, Masumi. He'll never be like you, so don't waste your time, Minato said, whispering, but Naruto's sharp ears picked up on it. Just forget about him. Like he doesn't exist. Alright Naomi-chan. Kushina offered, which Naomi nodded. Naomi quickly turned her head, but saw that Naruto wasn't there anymore. Yep. Just like any other day. Naruto sighed as he bit into his sandwich. He sat on his bed lazily, taking out a sketchbook. Just another day, huh Naru-chan? The voice echoed from inside his head. He smirked, shaking his head. That's right, Ju-chan. Or should I say, Kagaya Otsutsuki. Lady Kagaya bristled in annoyance. Don't call me that, foolish boy. I told you to refer to me as Otsutsuki-sama. Naruto chuckled, before taking another bite of his sandwich. The day I call you that is when you finally come out of my head, nay, Haim-chan. Naruto teased, twirling a pencil as he drew in his sketchbook. Kagaya huffed in annoyance, crossing her arms. You promised not to tease about that, Naru-chan. I'll come out eventually. Naruto nodded absent-mindedly as he focused on his drawing. When was that again, Haim-chan? When I hit 16. Naruto felt a soft prodding in his mind as Kagaya nodded. Give or take. Until then, I can only send out my chakra from your body until my soul can fully manifest. Naruto nodded, putting down his pencil as he finished his sandwich. Hi, I remember now, Naruto said, ripping the page out and posting it on an empty spot on the wall. It was a picture of a rabbit with a crown, bouncing about in the outdoors. I'll try to remember from now on, Ka-chan. Flashback. A year ago. A 5-year-old Naruto was playing absent-mindedly on a swing set by the park on top of the Hokage monument as he gazed up at the moon. He fiddled with the seams of his yukata as Minato and Kushina took Naomi out again during the Kyuubi festival on their birthday, well, Naomi's birthday, leaving Naruto behind at the house. He sighed as he turned his gaze back to the grass, messing about with it with his foot. He sighed and looked at the moon, a feeling of content washed over him. For as long as he could remember, the moon always looked illustrious to him and the prospect of the night excited him. He operated better at night anyway, so much so that his sleep schedule shifted by doing activities at night and sleeping during the day. Which was why his parents forgot him so often, or rather, one of the reasons. He scratched his face as he heard two people sit on the other swings to his left and right. Nice night, isn't it, Naruto? A bored Shikamaru Nara asked, dressed in a yukata swaying slowly on the swing back and forth. The moon looks big enough to eat, Akamichi Choji said in return, dressed in a yukata as well before pulling out a bag of kyuubi-shaped taiyaki and munching on one before passing it to Naruto. He sighed. It certainly is, illuminating. He said, passing the bag to Shikamaru who lazily took one. You could certainly say that. He said, yawning before nibbling on the taiyaki. The bag was passed back to Choji, who grabbed another. The trio sat in a comfortable silence as they enjoyed the taiyaki, looking over Konoha as the brilliant lights filled the town. Lanterns were strung about decoratively as the people chattered, the other kids playing games at stalls and food being served. All in all, it was a happy mood for the majority of Konoha, save for a few. A rustling from behind snapped the three out of their stupor as a raven-haired boy with a crest on his yukata sat in the grass in front of Naruto, propping up one leg for support, not before grabbing a taiyaki from the bag and settling down. Another day conquered. Sasuke Uchiha said dejectedly before a shoe came flying out of the bushes and hitting Sasuke square in the head. Oh quiet, you. All you did was cry because your Ka-san forgot to buy tomatoes, and now you're acting like you're about to die. Hinata Hyuga emerged from the bushes, dressed in a kimono as a tick mark twitched on her brow as she retrieved her shoe. That still hurts like a bitch, Hinata. Sasuke yelled before another shoe impressively hit him in the face. And you still complain like one, Sasuke. Sakura Haruno dressed in a pink kimono came out of the bushes this time, earning a glare from Sasuke. She raised her killer intent on Sasuke, making him flinch and stop. Good boy, she smirked. Before her and Hinata sat on the grass next to Sasuke. Shikamaru smirked as he continued to nibble on his taiyaki and lazily ducked as yet another shoe came flying, only from his side this time. Oi, Nara, why didn't you tell me you wake me at 6 p.m. like I told you? Ino Yamanaka stomped towards the group in a regular kimono carrying a picnic basket, her glare trying to burn a hole into Shikamaru's head before he waved her off. Troublesome woman, he murmured and dodged another shoe. Nay, settle down, Ino-chan. Shiki's always like that, Choji intervened, making Ino grumble and blush in embarrassment. Sasuke, Hinata and Sakura parted for Ino so she could lay the picnic blanket over the grass and the basket was placed in the middle. Naruto chuckled in his head, pointing out how a ragtag group of 5-year-olds could do this type of thing like teenagers. Ino pulled out several bentos with a slip of paper with their respected names before passing them out. Ka-san helped me make these, so you better eat them. Ino threatened, earning various voices of approval. There's more in here if you're still hungry, Kami-sake, knowing you guys. The septuplet enjoyed the romantic, moonlit dinner in each other's presence, chatting with one another save for Naruto, who looked at the moon hovering above Konoha. Once finished, he set his chopsticks on top of the bento with a clack and got off the swing. Thanks for this, guys. He said, smiling one of his rare smiles. The other 6 smirked, nodding. Not a problem, Naruto ni. Choji remarked. Shikamaru and Sasuke nodded in agreement. If there's something bothering you, you can always rely on your imoutos. Sakura said, smiling. Hinata and Ino nodded and smiled at Naruto too. Thanks, again. He turned and left, heading back to the Namikaze estate. Naruto closed the door to his room and sat on his bed, gazing out the window and at the moon once again. He sighed, and was about to lay down until a beam of light shot across the sky and at Naruto. Eyes widening, he was stunned as he basked in the light, and swore that for a fraction a second, a giant eye appeared over the moon's surface, purple in color with rings surrounding the pupil as Tomo-like shapes swirled in the ring's path before blacking out. Naruto stirred as the darkness was heavy on him, before opening his eyes. His body was partially submerged in shallow water and the room dark, stretching endlessly upwards. His breathing started to quicken as he looked around for unfamiliar places. Finding none, he almost cried in panic until his eyes landed on a cage not too far away from him. He quickly ran to it, filled with a sense of escape until he reached the bars. A large paper seal was attached to the bars and a glimmering ball of white light was trapped behind that. Curious, Naruto reached to the seal and his fingers brushed it. Quickly, strange markings filled the darkness lining the walls in a brilliant white color, and the bars shimmered before disappearing in an explosion of light. Darkness filled his vision until a figure came into view. It looked to be of a woman's figure, with long white hair and two protrusions on the head before she wrapped her arms around his body, pulling him into a hug. Shish, it's all right, I'm here. The voice cooed to Naruto, who was ensnared in its pleasant tone. Slowly drifting to sleep, he snuggled deeper into her warmth. Ka-chan, he murmured, making the woman's eyes widen a bit in surprise, before pressing Naruto deeper into her embrace. She laid her chin on top of his head and rubbed his back, before standing and turning around with Naruto still in her arms, going deeper into the abyss. Naruto woke up in his room in a cold sweat, the sun's rays beaming down on him from his window. He took a panicked breath in before looking about the room before realizing he was in bed. His body shivered when he thought back to the room with the odd symbols and the mysterious lady. Shaking his head, he left his room and closed the door quietly, so as to not attract attention and headed to the bathroom. Glancing lazily at the clock, it read 8:23 a.m. as he flicked his eyes to the mirror. Naruto jumped in surprise as he saw the same eye on the moon on his own two eyes. Curious, he leaned closer to the mirror and inspected it, moving his eyes around. What the hell is wrong with my eyes? Naruto thought, using a finger to pull his bottom eyelid down. It looked intimidating, with the royal purple coloring, not to mention the black rings and the occasional swirl of the three tomo in each ring. It honestly scared him a bit. Did you appreciate my gift, Naruto-kun? A female voice echoed from his head, and Naruto jumped in surprise again. The voice giggled pleasantly in amusement. Who are you? And where are you? Naruto said aloud until he felt a sharp pain in his head. He crouched and clenched his head with both hands, wincing in pain. Don't be so loud, idiot. Just use your thoughts to communicate with me. Naruto could visualize the voice crossing her arms and rolling her eyes in annoyance. Better yet, I'll talk to you face to face. Just stay still. Naruto felt a pulling sensation before he blacked out once again. Naruto woke up in a lush forest with flora growing around him as he started to get up. The sky was bright as the sun hovered overhead with clouds lazily crawling across it as the sounds of crashing waves filled his ears not too far away. A rabbit appeared out of the foliage and stood on its hind legs, seemingly to greet him as its nose twitched. Blinking, Naruto tentatively reached out to touch it. The rabbit didn't move as Naruto started to pet the rabbit on the head and felt an unknown tension in his heart ease slightly. The rabbit pressed into his palm before coiling itself around his arm as it made its way to Naruto, trying to get all of Naruto's touch. Naruto smiled softly as a grin stained his face and continued to watch the fluffy rabbit sit on his lap. A rustling from the bushes around him diverted his attention as more rabbits hopped out towards Naruto. Eyes wide, Naruto watched in awe as a horde of bunnies came into view and picked him up, acting as a means of transport and moving him deeper into the forest. Naruto giggled in joy at the softness of the rabbits as they eventually came across a clearing. Naruto noticed a lady with two protrusions from her head as her long white hair spilled over her back and across the grass. She was dressed in a silky white kimono with red-colored cuffs and tomo shapes above it. Much to Naruto's amusement, her gracefulness was broken when he noticed that she was prodding a rabbit in the face with a carrot. Come on, eat the damn thing already. She whined in frustration, her prodding becoming more quickly. The rabbit just wiggled his nose as it was assaulted by a blurring carrot. Reaching the pinnacle of her frustration, she threw the carrot at the rabbit, before the ball of fluff exploded into smoke. Quote. Was her facial expression can't really describe it without looking like a sack of potatoes, and Naruto giggled, catching her attention. Her face went through a range of emotions until it settled on a blush as she rubbed her arm in embarrassment. You didn't see anything, she said sternly, closing the distance between her and the fluffy horde, which dispelled as soon as she picked Naruto up. She narrowed her eyes at him as she held him up by the armpits. Naruto got a better look at her face, as her oval-shaped eyebrows, pupil-less eyes and rose-colored lips made her look mysterious to him. Naruto smiled and moved a hand to her nose, giving it a light squeeze. Honk. Kagaya could only smile at the little boy's antics and scrunch her face. Someone's being a little silly, aren't you? She said, teasingly. Naruto could only bloat his face, making an eye expression before Kagaya hugged him. Naruto was hit by the familiar scent from before and instinctively snuggled deeper into the fabric, murmuring. Ka-chan, he said quietly, before snapping his head back in embarrassment. Kagaya stared at the boy, her eyes wide before her eyes lit a bit. It's okay, Naru-chan. I'll be your Ka-chan, she said quietly, her eyes moist as the two silently embraced. The two stood there in each other's embrace until Naruto wiped the remaining tears out of his eyes and looked at Kagaya, who smiled and ran her fingers through Naruto's hair. I don't even know you and yet I feel safe around you, he trailed off, looking away from her eyes. Kagaya smiled and continued to stroke his hair. It's alright, Naru-chan, my Sochi. She said lovingly. Naruto didn't say anything in an effort to keep his emotions from running astray as Kagaya set him down. My name's Kagaya Utsutsuki, the rabbit goddess. She said as Naruto looked up at her in awe. I am the one who gave you those eyes. She said, snapping a mirror out of thin air and put it to Naruto's face. The tomo spun slowly in the ring's path as he got a good look at it again. Kagaya pulled the mirror away and laid on her side, patting the grass beside her. We need to talk, Sochi. She said, summoning pillows for their heads to rest on. Naruto fell onto the grass with an audible POMF. What are we going to do on the bed of grass? You get a cookie and an imoudo if you get the reference. LB. Having told her entire backstory to Naruto, Naruto was stunned by how old Lady Kagaya was and gave her a hug from time to time, because she's a big softie. Naruto said, earning him a carrot to the head. Needless to say, he was attentive when she got to describing the ocular powers she gave to Naruto. I gave you the Rinnegan, the most powerful of Dujutsu known to the shinobi world currently. However, yours is a more flexible one. Kagaya said, donning a school teacher outfit and a pair of secretary glasses at one point. A blackboard also appeared during her presentation with a stick of chalk. Kagaya drew the Rinnegan on the board to help explain it easier to Naruto, who was seated behind a desk. Now, what do I mean flexible? Simply, it means that you can evolve your Rinnegan and set levels for each Dujutsu power. She pushed the glasses back up her nose before drawing 3 other circles underneath the Rinnegan. In one, she drew 3 tomo in a ring, in the next she colored it lightly with the white chalk and the last one was left blank, until she drew an odd seal on it. Pointing to the first circle, she explained the powers of the Sharingan and drew another circle underneath, with a different design. Explaining that it was the Mangekyo Sharingan, she drew yet another circle underneath it with a small addition to the Mangekyo Sharingan, and described the effects of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto sat dumbly during the whole presentation but didn't say anything, letting her finish before he bombarded her with questions. Moving on to the second circle, she described the effects of the Byakugan and drew a second circle underneath it. This one had 3 rose-shaped flower petals in it. This is the evolved version of the Byakugan, the Piasu Byakugan, piercing Byakugan. This version lets you see blood flow and bodily functions such as heat production down to how many tears the person's eye is making. The Pyasu Byakugan also grants ocular powers, like the Mangekyo Sharingan. It allows the user to summon Sujin, the god of water, with his lance and shield. The user also gets an alternate version of Susanoo called Hachiman. At most, the difference will be the color scheme, and instead of being a giant construct like Sujin, it'll envelop the body in wrathful chakra for close-quarter combat, granting large amounts of strength. Finally, the last ability granted is Uoyamatsumi, a combination of Sujin and Hachiman. Since the gentle fist was derived from the fluidity of Sujin's attacks and the powerful strikes from Hachiman, Uoyamatsumi stacks Hachiman's strength and Sujin's speed, as well as an additional effect of healing the user during their frenzy. Kagaya finally paused, letting it all sink into Naruto's mind, which he totally didn't get but didn't say anything. Drawing a third circle underneath that, she drew the same design, only the pupil was half white and half black. Like the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, the eternal Pyasu Byakugan lets the user prone to drawbacks from using the Pyasu Byakugan. Blindness won't be a problem and attacks are boosted. Physical defensive attributes are added and an Aegis is granted to those who unlock the third stage and the ability to nullify elemental attacks. Now, when I said it was flexible, it means that you can use a level 2 Sharingan in tandem with the Pyasu Byakugan, or a plain Byakugan with an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. However, you do need to unlock these dojutsu powers before you can use them, otherwise you'd be a broken character and we can't have that at the moment. Kagaya finished, glancing at the reader before it flashed back to Naruto. He nodded slowly in confusion before Kagaya returned to the blackboard. Kagaya drew the third circle with the seal drawn on it came into play. She waved her hand over to Naruto, who slowly got up and made his way to the third circle. Now, what are the 5 basic elements, Naru-chan? Naruto put a finger to his chin and adopted a thinking face. Wind, water, earth, fire and lightning. Kagaya patted Naruto on the head. Good. And the many sub-elements to come with it will be under the Rinnegan's mercy. Kagaya said, cackling. Naruto waited patiently until she calmed down to continue her presentation. But what's the one thing that people could never control? What 2 elements happen every day, but no person can hope to bend its will? Kagaya prodded Naruto, who thought for a good 5 minutes before his eyes widened drastically. Light and dark, he exclaimed, to Kagaya's delight. Exactly. This seal will show you how much of an affinity you have to light and dark elements. She said, proudly, to see a confused look. But, if no one can control it, what makes you think I can? He asked. Kagaya stuck her outer lip out. A good question, Naru-pai. Naru-pai, what? But, do you know who I am? She asked, leaning into Naruto's personal space. Kagaya ka-chan, he said innocently, tilting his head. Kagaya stumbled as she tried to hold all of her willpower to not glomp Naruto and squeal, kawaii. Clearing her throat and waving her hand to her face to shoo away the blush, she shook her head. I'm a goddess, Naru-chan. Do you doubt my ability? She asked, a ghoulish face gracing her features. Naruto wisely shook his head vigorously. Good Sochi. Now, place your hand on the seal and think good and bad thoughts. She walked a bit away, giving Naruto space. Closing his eyes, Naruto thought about the pains of being neglected and it filled his body as he shook. Suddenly switching, he thought of the potential of a better day despite the pain and a determined crossed his face. The thoughts of his ka-chan, Kagaya, made him smile and feel warm inside. After a few more minutes, he pulled his hand away and opened his eyes. Kagaya approached and gasped at the result. One half was completely black, as it seemed to pull Kagaya into an abyss while the other side was completely white, blindingly so as it seemed like staring into the sun. The circle slowly oscillated until it became quicker and quicker until it stopped abruptly. A small circle of white appeared in the black and vice versa, resembling the yin-yang symbol. Kagaya quickly crouched and spun Naruto around, looking him dead in the eyes. Sochi, you're going to do great things and be a great thing to the world, she said, her eyes traveling across his face. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She wrapped him in her embrace shortly before standing back up, with Naruto piggybacking on her. Now let's go. Go where? Ka-chan. Naruto said as he rested his head on her shoulder. We're going to start training, Naru-chan. LB. A 20-year-old Naruto stood before Kagaya, dressed in a garb similar to Kagaya, only instead of red seams it was orange. Naruto was drenched in sweat and panted as he bowed low to his mother. Thanks you for everything, Kagaya Ka-chan. He smiled before fainting, falling backwards. Kagaya smirked as she laid down next to her Sochi, stroking his kissed him on the forehead and lifted him to a king-sized bed that she summoned. Sighing, she got on the bed and laid next to Naruto and deflated to relax, snuggling into Naruto's chest. Naruto, however, woke up in a different place. More specifically, a bathroom. Naruto's eyes reverted back to their dark blue color and he sighed, cracking his back. When you return back to the real world, only 10 minutes would have passed. For every minute out there, 2 years will pass here, alright Naru-chan. So don't be surprised when you wake back up as a 7-year-old. Kagaya waggled her finger at Naruto, who nodded. What about my body here? He asked, before Kagaya smirked. Don't worry, Sochi. It'll be fine. Anytime you return to your mindscape, you'll wake up in the body here, so no worries. I'll just be using it as a snuggle buddy since the body will be sleeping until you return. Kagaya said, smiling. Naruto shook his head, smiling at his mother's antics. Besides, my soul will manifest outside of your body, so I'll be able to hold you for real, okay Naru-pai. If you train so your body can accommodate the physical strength as your 20-year-old self here, I'll be able to come out sooner. She winked. Naruto nodded and hugged Kagaya one last time. Thanks again, Ka-chan. Welp, 13 years to go. Naruto stretched his body as his sister Naomi pounded on the door screaming for him to get out already. Having a twin sucks. Having a twin that's your parents' favorite sucks more. Having a twin that your parents love more and being left in the dust sucks donkey duty. Especially at a young age, where your two-san and ka-san are still trying to come to grips with what you and your twin want and not screw it up. I never had to go through that though, so fortunately and unfortunately, lucky me. I've seen the looks Minato and Kushina give me, like I'm the biggest mistake of their lives. But, you win some and you lose some, right? Anyway, let's get things out of the way first. My name is Naruto. Just Naruto. Not Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, just Naruto. I'm the twin brother of my sister Naomi, who's also the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I don't call my parents with the honorifics, because they don't deserve any honor from me, so why bother? This is a recalling about how I was neglected by my family in my first decade of living. And no, telling you my specific age doesn't matter. Because it's a recalling of an event in the past, so it means little if I tell you I'm 7 or 11 when I'm telling you these accounts. But let's get to business, shall we? See, it all started when Naomi decided to use the family as a catalyst to get what she wanted. A new toy, a place to eat, yada yada. Minato and Kushina would follow her by the nose and try to make her happy. She even got the limited Shinobi Man figurine that I've been aiming for at the store, and she just waltzes up to the clerk and asks for it. For free. And she got it. For free. Meanwhile, I've been around and about, doing my own thing with my buddies. Sasuke, Sakura, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Hinata, Kiba and Shino, the two are away on a mixed clan gathering, since the two clans are close friends. Flea removal and that stuff for the Inuzuka's nin dogs and whatnot. Of course, Naomi and the other two don't know since they don't make the space to care. I don't know if they have the capacity to care, who knows. Anyway, we were at this place called Ichiraku Ramen. The place is pretty good and I know the people there, Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne are good people and they have good company. We were on a rare family outing, when the mom and pops take notice of me from time to time when they forgot about me again when Minato ordered for the three of them. Tsukijiji didn't say anything as he placed my favorite ramen combo before me, dubbed the Swirling Fury Ramen. Loaded with spices and hot sauce, not to mention the extra pieces of Naruto in it. Ironic, no. Anyway, Kushina gasped when she saw the item on the menu and thought it was a tribute to her, being from the land of Uzu and having a title similar to the namesake. I rolled my eyes as she pointed it out to Naomi and Minato, whilst Tsuki and Ayame glanced at each other worriedly. Their eyes soon met mine, but I reassured them with my eyes and they sighed. But Kushina just wouldn't shut up. It was like listening to an old washing machine during its spin cycle. Rattly and obnoxious as heck, she continued to brag about it to Naomi and Minato, who were having a jolly old time. Having quite enough, I got up and moved from the stool to a booth a bit away from them. Naomi noticed the creaking sounds of me getting up and made her way to my booth, leaving Minato and Kushina engrossed in their conversation. So, Naruto Tem, you're still the loser you were when you were born, Naomi said haughtily. I rolled my eyes, looking disinterested. I didn't respond, making her try harder to rouse a sound out of me. Oi, speak to me when addressed, baka. She leaned in to try to intimidate me by getting into my personal space, or tried to. It's pretty hard when you're across somebody and a table's in your way. Not to mention that Naomi was pretty short, so that only lessened the effect. I continued to eat my ramen and I could see from the corner of my eye that she was getting frustrated. In a fit of anger, she launched my bowl across the room and it smashed into pieces, strands of ramen all over the place. Don't even ask about the broth. Minato and Kushina immediately rushed over to see what was the commotion and Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne peered from behind. What's going on? Are you alright? Minato asked. I noticed that Minato and Kushina didn't spare a glance my way. Naomi immediately worked her charm, faking a bruise and moistening her eyes. Naruto tried to pour the broth on me so I had to hit it away. She said, her voice breaking to keep up the act. Finally, the two noticed me with a hate-filled glare. Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne could only look on from the sidelines, afraid to do anything. Not that I blame them. You try fighting a pair of S-class shinobi with a mop and a wooden fence for a shield and get back to me on that. You insolent little brat. Minato had all but shouted, red in the face. Kushina wormed her way in, picking me up by the hem of my shirt. Why can't you be a good kid for once? All I hear are complaints from Naomi and they're all about you. She shouted in my face. And, being a toddler with your parents practically yelling, bloody murder, on you, it's pretty scary. I looked around, confused and almost crying as Minato and Kushina continued their verbal assault on me. Naomi could only sneer with malice as my own parents shook me emotionally. Soon, they got tired of yelling at me and picked up Naomi. Come on Kushina, let's go home. It's obvious that Naruto doesn't know how to be a good child. Kushina turned to pay Tsukijiji with a few bills. Sorry about that, Ichiraku-san. That idiot boy is always causing trouble. It's like he doesn't want to be loved. She exclaimed. She then turned her eyes to me. Don't come home until you learn to behave. She bellowed, leaving me alone with Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne as they left for the house. I could only stare in shock and fear as Ayame Ne picked me up and hugged me on the floor. I started to bawl. I didn't go home that night. Or the next day. Or the next few days. Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne had to take care of me during those days when I started to cry at random times. Heck, his wife, Kurumi Ba even threatened to place a ban on them, but Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne managed to calm her down, saying they'll lose money and lose their home. I overheard this and instead of anger, I felt shame. Shame that I'm a burden to them for them to have to protect me from my own family. As a way to combat my burden, I asked Tsukijiji to teach me how to make ramen, which he gladly took upon to continue his legacy in the craft. Still learning to this day, and making different combinations are hard enough. Now, let's get this out of the way. Minato and Kushina would never hit a child, they're good people in that sense. A child abuser will get shot down in the court of the daimyo faster than you can say Henge, Hokage or not. When I returned, which was about 5 days afterwards, since learning from Tsukijiji is fun, they didn't notice. Save for Naomi, who continued to throttle me into the bad light, which made Kushina and Minato retaliate by locking me in my room or not giving me dinner. Stupid for them, they don't know I could just sneak out of the window. Well, for a while. Minato found out and had the window locked from the other side and placed an alarm seal by the door so whenever I leave the room they know that I'm outside, and likewise when I go back in. After that, they ended up slowly erasing me from their lives. The pictures of all 4 of us were replaced with newer, updated versions without me in it. My drawings and toys were burned. Even my plate to eat with was thrown out. And I have to stay with them, otherwise Minato would get suspicious with me sleeping over and convince the parents that I'm just trouble when I walked in. During my time learning ramen making with Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne, Kurumi Ba is the manager and orders the ingredients. I met my ragtag friends. Each of them has a lasting impression when they first came to the stands. Kiba came with his mom Sum and sister Hana. Him and Akamaru, his nin dog, tried to nab some meat from the grilling station by the counter, which earned him a hard bopping with a metal ladle. Ayame Ne loved that ladle, and Kiba's head put a dent in it. Shino came with his parents and ate the ramen with his insect horde, making Ayame shriek and faint. Shikamaru came with Choji, who slurped up a XXL bowl-size serving of miso, beef, pork and shrimp ramen while Shikamaru, who didn't get any sleep that day, fell asleep in the bowl. Sasuke came with Ino and Sakura, who were talking about beauty tips. He looked lost, so I chatted with him a bit. He ended up laughing so loud after I told him a joke that Sakura elbowed him in the gut while Ino slapped him. Feeling bad, I bought a bag of tomatoes and gave it to his brother Itachi as an apology. Hinata was the most interesting to me, however. She shied away from me when I tried to make conversation with her, blushing and fiddling with her fingers. I assumed she was a shy and timid girl, but that turned out false. While she was eating, a team of genin had arrived earlier and got rowdy, elbowing her in the side. She stopped eating for a minute before she slammed her chopsticks on the table with an audible crack. I think the chopsticks split in the middle. Lengthwise too. She ended up grabbing 2 of them with her hands and biting the hem of the shirt of the third one and threw them out of the stand and beat them up. Truly, it was like watching a butcher stab, roast and slice up a pig. Or rather 3, since the team of genin suffered from cuts, Jukin strikes and ended up as a smoking pile on the street. She was ferocious. She came back after the scuffle and wiped the blood off with a moist towelette and looked at me hard. You didn't see anything. I nodded stiffly as Hinata paid the tip. When I asked Tsukijiji and Ayame Ne, who were in the stock room bringing out more ingredients, Tsukijiji just laughed. Oh, don't worry about that, Naruto. The Blood Princess has just been reincarnated, that's all. I looked at him confused before turning away slowly. They came back the next week and the 9 of us became quick friends. I told Minato and Kushina that I got a job so they wouldn't get suspicious, not that they would really care. So, that's about it, I suppose. I got yelled at by my parents, practically disowned, really. Seals were placed in my room, I was taken in by Tsukijiji, learned how to make ramen, met some people and made friends with them, and the rest is history. Naruto cracked his back as he stood up from his bed. Grunting, he put on his shoes and used his mokuton to bend the wood from his room outwards, allowing a hole to appear. Stepping out, he leapt from the hole to the ground before sealing the hole back. Looking around, he decided to go train. Say, Ka-chan, how am I doing on training? Naruto thought as he entered a brush of woods into an open field. Also known as Training Ground 47, the Forest of Death, Naruto continued to stroll on through. You're doing okay for now, Naru-chan. Kagaya said, examining Naruto's soul body. I'd say at the rate you're training at, when you become 16, I'll be able to manifest fully into the real world. She said as she spoon-fed Naruto's soul body with some chunky carrot soup. Naruto shook his head as he mentally saw Kagaya wipe the dribble that managed to spill over his soul self's mouth. Why do you keep feeding my soul? It's not going to give me any benefit, Ka-chan. Naruto thought, making Kagaya pout and cross her arms. I'm training for the day that I come out so I can feed you. She responded, blushing a bit. Ah, Ka-chan. That's sweet. Naruto teased, smiling. Kagaya didn't respond as he continued to make his way through the forest. The animals around him started to trail behind him, communicating to each other with a variety of sounds. This started to happen when Naruto first came to the forest. The animals attacked him on instinct but were all put down in their place. Needless to say, they acknowledged Naruto as their undisputed master. He also gives very good back rubs and belly scratches. Soon, Naruto reached a clearing in the forest. A very wide area of wooden and stone training dummies stood amongst it as kunai and shuriken chipped the material. He could already hear a voice from the center as the figure bounced around the dummies. The only defining feature that he could make out was a purple pineapple-shaped hairstyle and a tan trench coat. Clearing his throat, the figure stopped and looked at Naruto, smiling. Oi, Gaki, what took you so long? I've been preparing myself when we finally spar again. The figure said. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Anko, the Dango fanatic and former student of Orochimaru, the hubby Sanin. Oh, you know, Naomi tried to talk me down and Minato and Kushina tried to ignore me. You know, the usual. Naruto said, nonchalant. Anko nodded, brushing off the wood shavings from her kunai. So, are you ready, Gaki? Anko said, getting into her stance. Naruto rolled his eyes, before vanishing in a stream of blue light. I already beat you without using my power, unless you want me to bring it to the table. He said, confidence filling his voice. Anko just scoffed, throwing her arms forward as if waving something away. Do what you want, I'll have my victory this time, she said before getting into her stance. On 3. 1. Naruto rolled his shoulders and leg joints out with an audible pop. 2. Anko spun the kunai by the ring, making it look like a blurred disc. 3. Anko vanished in a body flicker before reappearing behind Naruto, who didn't move. With one arm cocked back with a kunai and another stretched out, she struck. Naruto dodged by moving backwards, bumping into her chest as grabbed the arm with the kunai and threw her over him. She spun as she landed on the grass and melted into the dirt. Anko burrowed her way towards Naruto, who jumped as soon as he felt the earth beneath him feel lighter. High in the air, Naruto enhanced the gravity on his body and he rocketed toward his previous spot, his legs smashing the dirt where Anko previously was into large chunks. Quickly, he shot out 3 shuriken behind him where Anko had to carry me out of harm's way. Dropping the ranged aspect, Anko appeared before him already with her fist moving fast into his face. Naruto parried by pushing her arm out of the way as the two exchanged a flurry of strikes. Naruto chipped her sides as he twisted and curved his fists into what looked like a piece of orange rubber, whipping her. Anko grit her teeth as she put her arms in front of her face to block, only to have it shattered by Naruto's small fist worming his way underneath it. The two finally separated as Anko panted, compared to Naruto who was sweating a bit. Get ready, Anko nay. I'll show you what I can do, Naruto said as he disappeared in another beam of blue light. Naruto reappeared far away from her as his hands glowed. In his hands was a double-headed staff with a blue orb at each end, decorated with a gold regal design. In front, was a glowing ball of white light with white rings. Anko can only watch in awe as he used his shadow clone jutsu to summon 9 other Narutos who threw 3 kunai each. Kunai multiplication jutsu. The 9 voices shouted as 30 kunai became 300. Quickly dispelling all 9, he struck his double-headed staff diagonally in the air. Reflection. For a brief moment, a large blue rhombus appeared vertically attached by gold brackets and white wings flourished before disappearing, as a beam of light shot out of the staff. It quickly bounced in between all 300 kunai before striking Anko at the speed of light, all 300 beams of light. Unable to move, Anko was struck by the most painful attack she ever felt before Naruto teleported in light again, an audible tingle sound, like wind chimes knocking against each other. Naruto reappeared before her as he grabbed the middle of the staff and slammed it down, the orbs changing from light blue to a dark red. Apocalypse! He shouted. A purple vortex appeared above and beneath Anko, coming up to her knees as she was now bathed by purple darkness filling the space. Like a typhoon of light and dark, the light beams and dark energy exploded into a violent display of black and white. Naruto stowed the staff away as the ball of light vanished, revealing a fairly beaten down Anko. I held back, Anko nay. Naruto said, smugly as he smiled at the dazed Anko. She was smoking slightly as she slowly got up, her clothes charred. Quote. Holy shit, Gaki, she shouted as she wiggled her body like a wet dog trying to dry off. Magically, the charred clothes returned to their previous condition. What the hell was that? She waved her arms up and down, frantic. Naruto chuckled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. That was my light and dark abilities. I didn't use my full power though. I'd say about 3% of power was put into the attack. He said, making Anko freeze before collapsing. 3%, Anko said quietly, her eyes became spirals as she fainted. Apparently, Naruto's attack was super effective. Naruto sighed as he put a hand to his forehead. Naruto put 2 fingers to his mouth as he whistled loudly. Not a second later, a large tiger came out of the nearby brush. Roar! The tiger barked at Naruto. It laid on its belly as it sat on the grass, sphinx-like. Naruto sat beside it and scratched its head, especially reaching behind its ears. The tiger purred as it leaned into Naruto's palm, its ears flicking occasionally. Rar, rar rar, it purred, lowering its head to the grass. Rar 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 to you too. Naruto teased. After a few minutes, Naruto stopped scratching its head, much to the tiger's chagrin. Take Anko to the hut nearby. Kurenai will be there, so just walk inside, okay? The tiger nodded, before wrapping its body around Naruto. Rar, it said, before nuzzling his side. Naruto smiled and hugged its head, petting it. Naruto broke off the hug and the tiger started to make its way to the hut. Dia, I want a cuddly tiger too. Kagaya made her presence known again, stamping her foot lightly in envy. Naruto chuckled, before the same tiger was conjured into his mindscape, to Kagaya's glee. Kagaya glomped the tiger as the two rolled around in a hugging battle. It looked like Kagaya was winning as she wrapped her legs around the tiger's body before laying down on it. She drooled in joy as she put her cheek between the tiger's ears. Hew 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 hew. Kagaya murmured on as she hugged the tiger's underbelly. The tiger can only roar at the sudden contact before pronking his way in a random direction. Kami damn it, Ka-chan. Naruto said, before vanishing in a shimmering light. Naomi was outside the Namikaze estate, being tutored by her parents, Minato and Kushina. She struck the straw training dummy with a fist to the head before doing a roundhouse kick to the body, shredding the straw just a bit. Kushina gave a holler as Minato clapped at her display. Way to go, Na-chan. Kushina smiled, picking up Naomi in a tight hug. Minato chuckled as he saw Naomi squirm under Kushina's bone-crushing embrace. Ma Kushi-chan, you're crushing Naomi. Minato lightly chided her as she looked at Naomi's blue face. Quickly, she let go and dropped Naomi onto the ground. Naomi grumbled, dusting her skirt off as she got back up. Meanwhile, Minato and Kushina were talking amongst themselves. She's got the katas down and her striking power are good for a girl her age. I think I should teach her that. Minato whispered as Kushina nodded. It'll help her in her defense and offensive areas and give her an edge in battle. I should teach her some kenjutsu too just to be safe. Kushina added as Naomi got back to attacking the straw dummy. I got just the weapon too. Minato raised an eyebrow. The Uzu manifest weapon system? He implored. Kushina could only nod excitedly. Now, I think it might be too early for her to learn that. Given that it's too big for her. Kushina nodded again. Well, I learned it from Mito Bachan when I was her age. I remember when I got the jitters when I got it too. She said, idly scratching her arms. Jitters. This is new, Kushi-chan. Minato said. Kushina could only fold her arms. It's said that the true wielder of the Uzu manifest weapon system will awaken its true form. As you know, it's in its unawakened form, a plain-looking katana with a spiral on the handle. But when it awakens, it'll merge with the body and the true heir can summon any weapon at their disposal, hence, manifest weapon system. Kushina concluded. Minato could only nod slowly. That said, the person that isn't the true heir will get an injury when they touch the spiral, ranging from a light shocking feeling, like I did, to potentially death if their deeds are with ill intent. Being young, I was innocent so it gave me a light shock. She finally concluded. Minato nodded, taking a minute to absorb the information. Wanna see if Naomi can use it? He said offhandedly. Kushina adopted a thinking expression before nodding. Sure, let me get it. She made her way into the house as Naomi finished beating down the straw target. Minato approached and placed a hand on her shoulder, congratulating her. Since you've been doing so well, I'll teach you my signature technique, Naomi. The Rasengan. Minato grinned as Naomi's eyes sparkled. Really too, Chan. Minato nodded and Naomi squealed in glee at the news. The auburn-haired girl could explode at any moment at the prospect of learning a high-powered ninjutsu when Kushina came back out with a long object wrapped in a black cloth adorned with gold designs and a gold spiral in the middle. Ta-da! Here it is, Kushina said, carefully unwrapping the sword. She left the cloth on the sheath as she held it there and slowly moved it to Naomi. Consider this my early birthday present to you, Masumi. Kushina smiled as Naomi's eyes gained an impossible gleam. Just make sure to touch this spiral symbol on the handle, Na-chan. Slowly, Naomi took the sword by the sheath and used her other hand to grab the spiral. What was expected turned out to be wrong as the sword glowed blue and sparks of electricity crackled around the sword, acting as a barrier. Naomi shrieked in pain so loudly, the nearby birds flew away. Minato and Kushina didn't bother taking a second to wrap their heads around the sight before them as they dashed towards Naomi, trying to wrench the sword away from her. Minato got shocked by a stray strand of electricity while Kushina fared a little better. Thanks to her Uzumaki blood, she withstood most of the pain and managed to pull it away. Naomi fell to the ground and Minato scrambled to pick her up, cradling her body in his arms. This can't be happening, Kushina said, finally taking things into account. She stared at the sword in a mix of fear and curiosity. The intensity of the light show before frightened her but made her question who the heir could possibly be. Deciding to test it herself, she grabbed the handle of the sword. An even bigger dome of lightning erupted from the hilt as it wrapped Kushina in its vortex of blue lightning. She didn't even last 5 seconds as she fainted, her hand unwrapping from the handle and twitching on the ground. Minato couldn't react any faster since Naomi was in her arms and he could only watch in silent horror, fearing for his wife's life as she crumpled onto the floor. Taking into precaution to what happened, he summoned 2 clones. One to carry Kushina and the other to wrap the katana back into its cloth and dashed into the house to administer aid. Naruto reappeared in front of the entrance of a wooden hut a bit away from where he defeated Anko in a brutal display of light and dark attacks. It was a medium-sized hut that was placed just above a cliff overlooking a waterfall with a patio that stretched on the side of the house. Naruto noticed that the white tiger from before was resting on its paws, looking at the scenery. It turned its head as it heard Naruto's footsteps clunk up the stairs. Naruto walked over to the tiger and sat next to it, as it laid its head on his lap. "How's Anko?" Naruto asked as he absent-mindedly petted the tiger. "Rawr." The tiger responded, purring comfortably as Naruto scratched behind its ears. "Well, I'm glad you made it here quickly. You should probably return home, you know how your wife gets," Naruto said, as the tiger reluctantly raised its head. Giving one last nuzzle, it slowly made its way down the stairs and back towards the forest. Sighing, Naruto cracked his back and proceeded to enter the hut. "Hello, hello," Naruto greeted as he quickly ducked. A kunai flew over his head. He tsked and made a face of disapproval. "Come on, Anko Ne-chan. That's not nice," he pouted, before he sidestepped a snake that barreled at him. "Screw you, Gaki. You're lucky I didn't use my curse mark on you," she shouted before she yelped, as Kurenai shoved her bandaged body back onto the bed. Hi, Anko. You need to relax," Kurenai said before she turned to Naruto and smiled. "Good morning, Otuto," she said as she applied some cream on a burnt area on Anko's back, making her scream. "Morning, Kurne-chan," he said as he approached the bed. Anko was, save for some bandages that wrapped tightly against her chest and a pair of boxers that saved her modesty. His eyes traveled to her neck, where he smiled nostalgically at the curse mark. Flashback. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the animals in the Forest of Death. He had originally came here to see what the fuss was about when he overheard some chunin talking about the forest and how deadly the animals were. Naruto decided to investigate and ended up in this situation shortly after. They had surrounded him when he first stepped foot into their territory, his unknown scent putting them on alert. He was about to attack when a purple-haired kunoichi landed in front of him, smirking. "What's this? A new prey for me?" Anko said with a glint of mischief. Her smile showed killing intent in an effort to scare the 7-year-old in front of her. "You better be careful, kid, or else I'll end up sacrificing you to my snakes." However, that was not the case as Naruto's expression deadpanned. "You're weird," Naruto said before turning around and proceeding deeper into the forest. Anko could only stare dumbly as the blonde mop of hair disappeared behind some shrubbery. Naruto had came across a clearing in the forest after about 5 minutes had passed after meeting the odd lady before he heard the shrubs behind him rustle violently. "Wait a minute," the voice said as the purple-haired lady launched herself in front of Naruto again. "Who do you think you are? Do you know who I am?" Anko said with a deadly expression. That soon collapsed as Naruto tilted his head cutely and scratched the back of his head, his eyes gazing towards the sky. Anko had to use all of her willpower not to hug the 7-year-old who wandered into her forest. "Ka-chan, do you know who this lady is?" Naruto asked himself. Kagaya only grunted as she didn't respond. She was sleeping, as her face was planted firmly into a fluffy pillow with her arms and legs stretched out like a star. Unfortunately, her horns had pierced the pillow and the fluff started to escape from its confines. Deciding that his Ka-chan was down for the count, Naruto returned to the purple lady. "No," Naruto said before looking back at Anko. Anko could only open her mouth in shock at the Gaki. "You never heard of me?" Anko asked. Naruto shook his head. "The snake mistress. The great and powerful hubby-chan. The sexy and beautiful, heartbreaking, male-dominating, Anko Mitarashi," she spouted. Naruto could only cross his eyes, thinking, before shaking his head again. Anko closed her mouth as her head dipped, her eyes overcast by a shadow as her body shook. Naruto decided it would be a good time to inch away from the purple-haired lady, not wanting to be around her anymore. He turned around until he felt something whiz by and scratch his cheek. A kunai embedded itself on the tree behind him as he touched his cheek, blood coming out of it. Hee, ha 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 ha. Anko cackled manically as her eyes looked frenzied. Naruto's own eyes widened as Anko started launching kunai at him. Thinking fast, he dodged the volley of kunai until she vanished. He turned around and saw Anko behind him, her smile feral as she came for the kill. Not that she was going to, she just wanted to scare the kid. She had a reputation to retain after all. Just as she was about to slash at him, she felt something hard hit her stomach that punted her against a tree. Naruto had his leg outstretched as he lowered it, before wisely using chakra on his legs, jumping back into the trees. Get back here. Naruto heard the indignant cry before snakes started to fly at him. Naruto dodged a few until he felt teeth sink into his leg, making him lose balance and fall to the ground. Immediately, Anko bursted from the foliage and crouched above Naruto, smiling. The snake had injected some venom into his leg, making it paralyzed. You're pretty good, Gaki. But not good enough. Naruto panted heavily, as the venom numbed his leg. He stared at Anko until a visible black circle on her neck caught his eye. Anko followed his gaze and her expression dropped, saddened. She quickly adjusted her trench coat to cover the mark, but Naruto was already pushing her down onto the grass, trying to get a better look at it. Trigger. Lime warning. What the hell are you doing, kid? Anko tried to push him off but found herself unable to move her arms. She also couldn't feel her legs and arched her head to look at the Gaki on top of her, who had seemingly recovered from the snake venom earlier. A thing of rope had bounded her legs and arms together, as Anko tried to move them until she felt something press against her. Looking down, she saw more rope around her body and vaguely realized she was bound in a scandalous shibari position. Her face reddened when she noticed that her arms were bound behind her back, tied to her thighs that were skyward, allowing full view of her intimate region as she spread eagle. To make it worse, a 7-year-old had done this. Anko's mind raced as she ran through many scenarios if someone found her like this. She started to sweat, as she imagined Kurenai, Yugao or Hana discovering her and calling her a Shotokan. To make matters even more worse, Naruto had somehow removed her trenchcoat while she was tied and started to pull down the neck seam of her fishnet shirt. Oh oi, stop it right now, Anko stuttered, but she received no response. On the flip side, Naruto had placed his warm palm on Anko's sweaty skin, more specifically, her shoulder to try to get a full view. He felt Anko shiver as he angled her a bit. His eyes calculative as he studied the seal. Nay, Naru-chan. What are you doing? You know you're making the snake lady excited laughing face, Kagaya said in the mindscape. She had apparently woken up and somehow made a facial expression that Naruto caught. This mark is hurting the lady. Naruto thought simplistically, concerned for Anko. All the while Anko struggled not to moan as the rope pressed against her flower, and pressed her together. And she was failing spectacularly. Ka-chan, can you help me take it off? Naruto asked, as Kagaya looked at the seal from Naruto's eyes. She materialized the image of it in front of her as she took a minute to study it. After a while, she placed her fist on top of her palm, before channeling some of her chakra into Naruto's hands. Okay, Naru-chan. I'm placing my chakra into your hands, so make sure you follow my instructions. Kagaya stated. Naruto nodded as silvery wisps of her chakra glowed on his hands. Naruto became dead to the world around him as he followed the movements Kagaya were showing him on the curse mark. The moment he touched the mark, Anko had her mouth full of grass as she felt an intense feeling of pleasure. It only escalated as the felt Naruto's fingers tracing over the mark, as if massaging it. She couldn't hold it anymore as she was thrown into a large vat of ecstasy, her back arched as her teeth had effectively ripped the grass from the ground. Her thighs felt damp as her eyes rolled back to her head, her mouth gaping as her tongue rolled lazily out of her mouth. She made a few squeaks of pleasure before she relaxed, her panties and thighs feeling sticky against her skin. Naruto returned to reality as he finished the movements, as the curse mark changed into a different shape. Trigger. End lime. Instead of the 3-tomo design, a whirlpool took its place with a line through it. He could feel the negative energy vanishing and being replaced with his own. Naruto, oblivious to Anko's occasional twitches, had undone the pose he tied Anko in. He only realized that she was unconscious, save for the occasional twitch her legs did. Thinking that he had hurt her, he felt sorry and wrote a quick note on a piece of paper he had on his person and placed it in front of Anko, before going back to Konoha proper, having his fill of adventure. Shortly after, Anko had woken up and discovered the note. It read, "Hello Snake Lady. I'm sorry sad face. Naruto." Anko could only stare incredulously at the note before crumpling it in her hand and tossed it. She sat on the grass as she remembered what the kid had done to her. She shivered, wrapping her arms around her frame before having an atomic blush. End flashback. Naruto shook his head at the fond memory, where Anko had found him a few days later and hugged him. Though, she was embarrassed, hugging a 7-year-old in a provocative way as she felt his head between her. Kurenai had finished applying the soothing cream to Anko's back, who hissed in pain before being cooled down thanks to a breeze, courtesy of Naruto. "Thanks a lot, Gaki," she mumbled, bummed out at her inactivity. He chuckled as Kurenai decided to go to the kitchen to cook something. "Are you hungry, Naruto?" Kurenai asked from the kitchen. She heard him say no before a deafening boom had rang out. Kurenai jumped, as did Anko, and Naruto stormed out of the door to investigate. A large dome of blue lightning had appeared at Konoha as Naruto's eyes widened. It receded and Naruto was about to speak before a larger dome of lightning appeared. Thinking fast, he rushed back to Konoha, getting ready if there were enemy nin in the town. When Naruto had appeared back in Konoha, he had landed on the roof of a building. The lightning was coming from his home and he quickly darted towards it, with the intent of rescuing his family if needed. Just because they shunned him, it would be illogical to return the negative feelings. It would only build up if it came to that. Naruto had jumped over various houses before jumping into his backyard, where the source of the lightning came from. He saw Minato summon 2 clones before picking up Naomi and Kushina and dragged them into the house, closing the door with his foot. He landed on the training ground and saw a sword and shroud, where blue electricity crackled violently as it seemed to glow before disappearing. "I better get this away." Who knew what the hell Minato and Kushina were doing? Naruto said before grabbing the shroud and sword. Immediately, he felt a pulling on his mindscape and collapsed, as the shroud and sword had turned into orbs of light and went into Naruto's body. Naruto's eyes furrowed as he felt his clothes stick to him. Slowly, he opened his eyes. A temple had greeted his eyes as he scanned the area. The temple had many ancient drawings, of battles that were lost to him. Ruins had encircled around him as a small puddle of water in the center was filled. Blue wisps flew around the temple, but what really drew his attention was a staircase. A really long staircase, as it stretched to almost infinity until it stopped on what appeared to be a throne in the distance. If you can't imagine it, think of the fairy temple in Laws. "Ka-chan, where am I?" Naruto asked, to receive no response. He scratched his head, confused. If this was his mindscape, where was Kagaya? Unless. Naruto shook his head, and decided to ascend the staircase, seeing no other way to progress. He climbed the first 10 steps before he heard a warping sound. He turned around and widened his eyes, as the steps started to vanish in a blue vortex. Naruto began running up the stairs, with the intent of not being dragged into whatever the hell the portal did to the steps. Test of the body. A voice said. Naruto had a hard time distinguishing the gender of it, since his mind was racked with panic. Make it to the platform to clear this trial. The voice said again. Naruto looked around, looking for a platform until he saw the stairs a distance ahead of him separate, as a large platform took its place. Running on adrenaline, he powered through the steps and eventually made it to the circular platform before collapsing. An audible ding was heard as Naruto relaxed to catch his breath. The next test. Mind. The voice said. Naruto didn't bother to move as he was still tired. The objective. Survive. The voice vanished. Naruto was left confused until the area around him warped into Konoha. More specifically, his home. He saw his family giving him disapproving looks of unbridled fury, glaring at him. Their shapes twisted and turned into black demons, as it proceeded to assault Naruto. Their guttural growls screeched into his ears as tendrils sprouted from their backs, piercing his skin. He could only scream as he felt his being torn to pieces. Naruto gasped as the pain only increased in severity. Naruto was about to give up until he felt a warm presence on his back amidst all the chaos. White delicate fingers caressed his head as the demons retreated, growling. His wounds started to heal as he was enveloped by the figure behind him. "It's all right, Sochi," Kagaya whispered into his ear. Naruto's eyes widened before relaxing, subconsciously pressing against Kagaya for comfort. "Mommy will always be here for you," Kagaya finished. Naruto felt his eyes tear up, his heart aching to hear those words for the longest. He silently cried as Kagaya had wrapped Naruto into a loving embrace. The demons screeched as their bodies dissolved, as black dust blew away against the wind. Naruto's crying stopped as he turned to face Kagaya, a smile adorned on her face. She slowly faded away before she kissed his forehead, and vanished. Naruto shook his head and regained his senses, as an audible ding sounded again. An invisible force nudged Naruto towards the staircase as he glanced upward. The throne seemed closer now as Naruto ascended. "The final test. Soul," the voice said. Naruto had reached the top of the staircase, his body sore and his emotions fluctuating. The throne vanished and in its place a large stone door appeared. Carved into it was a large tree, as it climbed all the way into the blue abyss of a ceiling. Naruto approached slowly, as he saw a particular spot for a hand to fit into. It was at the base of the tree, and had something inscribed underneath it. "What is Naruto Uzumaki's greatest goal in life?" it said. Naruto closed his eyes and breathed in, before pressing his hand into the handprint. "The innocence of others. To ensure no child goes through life without family, to ensure no father has to bury their children, and to ensure that every mother live without grief of their loved ones," he said resolutely. A moment passed before the large door glowed. White lines flowed from the handprint as it climbed the tree and separated into the branches, and shot outwards. There was a chime. "Good answer." And the door opened. Naruto was blinded by a bright light, covering his eyes with his hands. The light soon died down as Naruto struggled to make out what was behind the door. The throne from before soon appeared behind it, as the door shimmered out of existence. Naruto cautiously approached, looking around it for any traps or the sword before sitting down, deeming it safe. As soon as he sat down, two bright orbs came out of his body and floated before him. The orbs glowed before it took shape of two figures. A sword and a shroud. Naruto recognized it as the objects he picked up when he arrived home as the items started to shimmer. The sword turned into a figure of 5 feet 9, as it started to become curvier. The light dimmed as it revealed a woman who had blonde hair and dark skin, with a large bust and an hourglass body. She was dressed in a butler uniform with coat tails that did nothing but accentuate her curves. Her eyes showed nothing except for stoicism, save for the millimeter glare that was directed at Naruto. The shroud grew until it appeared only a head shorter than Naruto. She had red hair and light skin, and was dressed in a pale yellow blouse that had flowers on it. She had a megawatt grin as she started to run and launch herself at Naruto. "Oni-kwan!" she exclaimed, as the red missile blurred and crashed into Naruto's stomach. She smiled as Naruto tried to recover, giving a hug and making a hum of delight. The taller woman only made a sound of disgust as her glare increased. "Such unruly behavior, especially at a creature such as you." She directed the insult at Naruto, who only narrowed his eyes. She was about to say something until the little girl jumped and slapped the woman on the face. "Bad. Don't make fun of Oni-chan." She pouted, her hand ready to give a good slapping if she said anything again. The lady recovered as her face turned to that of rage. "Don't defend him. He's weak. He might have earned your respect but not mine," she shouted, and Naruto could have swore he saw fire come out of her mouth. The little girl growled before tackling the older woman, sending the two careening off the platform into the abyss. Sounds of the little girl's screams paired with the older woman's indignant cries only served to make Naruto's sweat drop. A woman was pacing back and forth under a dimly lit room as she pondered on her next course of action. Her mind was racing as she took in the results of a recently failed experiment. As she went back and forth, she clicked her tongue in disapproval before slamming her hands on the counter, shaking the beakers and test tubes that were sitting in wooden stands. Swiftly grabbing her purple-rimmed glasses, she put them on as she tied her hair in a ponytail, her black hair hanging a little past her neck. A purple hairpin fastened a chunk of hair above her forehead as she grabbed a clipboard and scribbled some things in before the door opened, revealing a person in a white scientist coat. "Ma'am, the new specimen is ready," the scientist said curtly, getting a nod from the other woman. The door closed as the woman placed the clipboard on the table with a clack. She shook her head. This isn't going well, she thought, her eyes darting from the blackboard in the room and back to the notes on the clipboard. Sighing, she grabbed her coffee as she went to a dial in the room and turned it, the light dimming until it was pitch black. She wrenched open the door and slammed it shut, walking down a corridor before going into a larger room. She wore a light gray blouse that hugged her figure, doing little to hide her curves as it accentuated her bust and slim waist. Her own coat fluttered from the breeze as she ascended a metal walkway into a higher office. Next to it was a utility box fixated on the wall which she opened and grabbed a megaphone. Turning about face, she oversaw what was going on below. Dozens of other scientists crowded over different sections of the room, hunched over as their voices spoke rapidly to each other. The room was filled with scritches on black boards and clinks of glass being placed or stirred. The woman started to move about the walkway that hung above the scientists, her heels making minute noises that slowly brought the attention of the other scientists. Seeing their break from work, she put the megaphone in front of her lips. "Get back to work," she bellowed, as the other scientists jumped at the sound and worked with twice as much effort. Seeing their efforts doubled, she went back to the office and consulted the computer in front of her before her hand went to her temple. "Cammy, save me," she mumbled, as she took a deep breath. After a few minutes, she pulled open a drawer and pulled out a mirror and placed it in front of her. "Cammy, my makeup smudged again," she said, before her pale hand reached for her pocket makeup kit and dabbed under her sharp yellow eyes. She turned her head left and right, before smiling, showing her elongated fangs. "All right, Orika, it's showtime," she said, the now identified snake Sanin parting her mouth a little to allow her long tongue to gyrate a little as she hissed, before her assistant Kana opened the door. With her silver hair done up in a bun and her round spectacles resting on her face, she was about to say something before deadpanning. "Orika-sama, you're doing that again," she said, tiredly as the Sanin quickly snapped her mouth shut, blushing from embarrassment. "Don't judge me," she cried, stamping her foot as Kana shook her head, amused. Hi, Orika-sama. But, the specimen has arrived," she said, her face serious as all mirth drained from her expression. Orika did the same, as she readjusted herself before following Kana out the door toward the room full of scientists. As she made her way past the scientists, they copied her expression, some even sweating a bit at the gravity of the situation. Kana and Orika approached a stage hidden in the back of the room as all of the scientists made their way toward it, sitting on gray folding chairs as their attention was directed at their superiors. A large red curtain concealed whatever had Orika's interest as Kana disappeared behind it. After a little while, the lights went out, before a rustling of chains was heard. The curtain was pulled apart as a large spotlight illuminated the center of the stage, revealing Kana holding something rather dangerous. The scientists gasped as Orika smirked like a predator, eyeing the item before her. Kana's own body blocked the item of interest before moving out of the way, to reveal A life-sized plush of a 12-year-old Naruto Uzumaki with a bashful expression, courtesy of Kana, who spent a week stalking observing Naruto as he went about his daily activities, including when he slept, who she may or may not have filched a few orange jumpsuits to give to Orika. And she may or may not have her own life-sized plushie who she dressed in the same jumpsuit and used as a body pillow to help her go to sleep, her room totally not filled with everything Naruto related, ranging from a Naruto poster to a Naruto pencil which she currently had tucked behind her ear. The same could be said about Orika, but to the more extreme. Orika's breath became ragged as her face reddened, her hands shot outward in groping motions as she approached the bashful, plush kun, before she schooled her emotions, the vestiges of a blush still lingering after she noticed Kana's gaze. A heart-shaped device was wrapped around the plush, a large display taking the center portion of the device and a small LED on the top section. Kana shuffled out of the way, allowing her sensei ample room to work with as her eyes roamed to the scientists, quickly writing into their clipboards as their eyes never left the stage. Pressing a red button that was on the side of the device, the screen lit up as a boot logo of a chibi Naruto appeared, winking and giving a thumbs up. A jingle played before text appeared on the screen. Affectionately, it spelled out, "Doki Doki Love Sama. Confess your love and get the top rank to get a prize with your loved one. Press the heart to get started." The text disappeared, only to be replaced with a HUD, one section detailing an affection meter in a shape of a heart and a background of floating, smaller hearts with words like, "Good luck," or, "Love." Nervous, Orika started to chew on her purple-colored nails before turning around to the crowd of scientists, who just happened to be all female. What do I do, girls?" Orika stuttered, eyes looking hopeful as she poked her index fingers together. This was an everyday occurrence at Orika's lab. Anyway, the scientists could only shrug before one in the back shouted, "Just do your best." This roused the other scientists as they encouraged Orika to just do it. Orika was stunned, her eyes widened as she slowly started to tear up. "Everyone," she thought, before shaking her head and turning her hand into a fist. With renewed vigor, she spun around and walked toward the plush Naruto, making the scientists go silent in anticipation. Orika tapped the heart on the display before it switched to numbers counting down. It chimed as the number started to decrease, before a large display slowly dropped down from the ceiling. Orika felt something wash over her as she closed her eyes, a gust of wind tickling her skin before she opened her eyes again. She was briefly brought into awe as the scenery changed. Inside the simulation, instead of a laboratory, she was instead in a park that was filled with sakura trees, the petals falling around her and the sun set to the point where the sky was orange-pinkish. Green grass rolled around her as large buildings surrounded her position. What stuck out to her most was that she was inside what seemed like the front entrance to a school, a large clock tower with a bell in the center of the building. A breeze tickled her legs as she glanced down, taking in her change of attire. She was dressed in a navy blue skirt that just reached her knees and a white raiment, with a sort of white flap at the back with a blue design on it. A bow decorated her collar as her hair had now reached her lower back, about the height of her behind. Violins were playing a romantic tune, as if trying to set the mood before a deep voice called her name. "Orika-san." She spun around, her eyes settling on the person before her. She immediately blushed. "It's Naruto-kun." Her mind racing a mile a minute, a blush staining her cheeks as her eyes roamed over the body of a 24-year-old Naruto, who had on an orange blazer with a spiral crest on his pocket, a white dress shirt with a black tie and black dress pants, and black dress shoes. He had a shoulder bag hanging off the side lazily as his sun-kissed hair seemed to shimmer from the sunset as his spikes danced lazily against the wind. His eyes showing concern as his mouth contorted to a small frown. Orika could only blush harder. So handsome. Her mind squealed in joy, a chibi Orika dancing happily in her mindscape. "I received your letter in my mailbox, Orika-san. Do you need help with homework or something of the other?" Naruto said, rubbing his sleeved arm in the cold. Orika looked confused for a second. Homework. What homework? She said, still a bit shell-shocked at Naruto's appearance. Naruto's face seemed to cool into a smirk as he chuckled, shaking his head. The homework I assigned you, remember? I am your math teacher after all. He said, his clear cerulean eyes striking into her yellow one. Naruto is a teacher. Would I be his student then? That would make him, Naruto, senator. Say. Orika's mind couldn't entertain the thought as steam ejected from her ears in her head as she fell backwards. Naruto jumped before rushing over to her as she landed into his arms. He shook her body as he brought her face closer to his. Orika-san, are you alright? Naruto called out, as Orika slowly opened her eyes. Naruto-sensei, she mumbled, before she realized the proximity of their faces and blushed. This is just like those books I read. A forbidden relationship between teacher and student. Kya! She screamed internally. Naruto's eyes shifted into deeper concern as he looked over her. Oi, Orika-san, he said, now deeply concerned. However, his fears were dashed away as Orika started to squirm and he placed her back on her feet. He exhaled a breath of relief before smiling at Orika. I'm glad you're alright, Naruto said, making her heart flutter. If that's all, I'll start making my leave. Naruto turned around and started walking towards the school gate before Orika could say anything. Thinking quickly, she shouted. Naruto-sensei. Orika called after him, running to him as he turned again. She panted as she stared deep into his eyes. With burning determination, she started to speak. The reason why I called you out was, she said, getting Naruto's attention as he raised an eyebrow. Yes, he said, silently giving her the signal to continue. Kami-sake, this is harder than I thought. What am I saying? Of course this is hard. Orika thought, before continuing. I like you, Naruto-sensei. Orika spat out, her hands clasped together. She noticed Naruto's expression drop from concern to a stunned one. She continued to press. Ever since I've known you, sensei, I always liked you. Orika said in a low voice as her eyes diverted toward the ground. You made me smile when I was sad and you always comforted me when something went wrong. Her voice started to tremble as her eyes started to tear up. Naruto's eyes were overcast by a shadow as his hair covered his eyes. And I can't get you out of my head. Every time when I go to sleep, my mind would drift to you and I would be so happy. Orika started to choke up, but she didn't let that stop her. She placed a hand over her chest, more so over her own heart. My heart won't stop beating, not even now. So please, Naruto-sensei, no, Naruto-kun. I love you. She finally hammered out, her thoughts racing a mile a minute. She bit her lower lip, before her head shot up to meet Naruto's eyes. Please be my boyfriend, Naruto-kun. She said with conviction. Naruto could only hold the stunned expression, taking in Orika's face as tears flow freely down her cheeks. Orika never broke the gaze before Naruto started to chuckle, before bringing his right hand over to her cheek. He gazed lovingly at her as she gasped at the warm contact, his thumb running over her cheek. Orika, I've been waiting for the longest. Naruto finally said. Orika gasped, her eyes shimmering. You mean, she silently begged for it to be true, and she wasn't disappointed by the next few words that came from his mouth. Yes, Orika, I love you too. He smiled, before he brought his other hand on the middle of her back, bringing the two closer. Orika waited with bated as Naruto came closer, never breaking eye contact. Soon, the two were nose to nose, their lips mere centimeters from meeting. End simulation. Until the simulation ended, the display showed all of this as the scientists were crying, tissues clutched tightly in their hands as a few blew their noses. Even Kana had tears in her eyes as she dabbed her face. However, the same couldn't be said with Orika, who violently shot up and shouted. Kami, damn it, I was so close. She cried, anime tears streaming down her face as her hand was made into a fist. Her attention was brought back to the Naruto plush with the device as a voice chimed in. Wow. Such love. Congratulations, Hubby Heim 123, your affection levels are off the charts. You placed first in the rankings. The device beeped, and Orika whooped alongside her female associates. A hissing sound appeared near the belly of the plushie as a gold ball rolled out of the slot. Orika raised an eyebrow. Kana-chan, wasn't this made out of fluff? Not machinery. A shine was casted over Kana's glasses, blocking her eyes. There's a lot you don't know about this plushie, Orika-sensei. She said ominously, which Orika hesitantly nodded. She grabbed the gold ball, and read the text written in black marker to, give this gold ball to the Street Lottery Committee in Konoha for your free grand prize, a date with Naruto Uzumaki at the age of legality. Because why not? Without even a second's notice, Orika jumped off the stage and used an earth jutsu to make a pillar appear from under her, shooting up and out of the underground facility towards the surface. Kana's sweat dropped at the ugly, brown monstrosity before her. Welp, we got a pillar now. Even despite that we're wanted missing Nin and we're in the land of rice. She said, before shooing away the other scientists to get back to work. Time skip, the event above happens during this time. A 12-year-old Naruto Uzumaki hummed to himself a jaunty tune as he made his way towards the Ninja Academy. A lot has happened during the 5 years since meeting the fabled Uzu Manifest System and the Shroud of Darkness. Including his powers, which Kagaya briefed him a while ago. Apparently, his eye abilities are locked for now, as he doesn't need to use them for any reason at the moment, being 12 in all. His light and dark abilities are still at his beck however, so for now he'll have to make do. Only 4 more years, until Ka-chan will be released. Naruto said, excitedly. He couldn't wait for his surrogate mother to come to the real world. His mind was brought out of it as he saw the 3 people he dreaded meeting the most. The Namakazes. During his pre-teen years, Naruto has been around the estate less and less, until he finally couldn't handle it anymore and moved out. Much to his slight chagrin, no one in the estate seemed to notice, as he was already sparse in their time as a family. Naruto moved in at a spanking, new apartment complex that was built a few years ago at the top floor. It was fully furnished, with a comfortable couch, a nice TV with white decorated walls and wooden flooring. He had other rooms, like a few bed and bathrooms and other ones that took too long to describe in length. He only moved in however, when he was 9 years old, playing at a jungle gym with Sasuke and Kiba. Flashback. A purple snake slithered up to Naruto with a purple envelope and a heart as a acting seal, with the words, to Naruto-kun, from Hubby Heim, insert heart here. Cautiously, Naruto took the envelope, not before the snake nuzzled his hand before poofing away. Sasuke and Kiba moseyed toward Naruto who opened the envelope. Inside was a small note and a gold ticket. You have been granted a penthouse suite by a secret admirer at the Shinobi sector in Konoha. Congratulations. In the corner, was a childish drawing of a heart in purple crayon, along with directions to the complex. Naruto scratched his head, confused, since he wasn't a shinobi yet and the snake didn't make it much better. Having nothing better to do, he shrugged as he decided to investigate, Sasuke and Kiba deciding to follow. A few moments later, Naruto was in an elevator going to the top floor of the complex, along with Sasuke and Kiba. The elevator stopped with a ping and Naruto stepped out, moving towards the only door on the floor. A face scanner and a ticket reader was placed on the wall, and a mechanical lock barring entry to non-residents. Naruto fed the ticket into the machine as it took in Naruto's face. Sasuke and Kiba hung back, looking at the pottery and the red carpet, marveling at how soft it was as they laid on floor. The door opened and a pale hand quickly grabbed Naruto's small body, before closing again. Kiba and Sasuke could only angle their heads to see, before plopping down, the carpet too soft to move from. When Naruto no longer felt something pulling him, he quickly hopped on his feet, to meet the pale face of Orika, who had a gleam in her eye. In less than a second, She pulled Naruto in and hugged the small body while rubbing her cheek against his. Deciding that she meant no harm, Naruto dropped his guard and gave into the ministrations of the hubby Sanin, if the large amount of snakes pulling furniture into different rooms was any indication. And for the whole day, the two just did things. Well, they played with each other, and when Naruto was hungry, Orika would whip something up and feed him like he was a toddler. She would also give him hugs whenever she had the chance, and acted pretty much like a doting mother. Naruto was happy, and when it was time for Orika to go, Naruto's sad face tugged at her heartstrings. She almost wanted to drop everything and stay with Naruto forever, but her plans at Rice were too great at the moment. It didn't help that Naruto called her his Nei-chan, nor did it help when it looked like she just kicked the everlasting life out of his puppy, as his large irises watered up when she had her foot out the door. Giving one last hug, that lasted for 10 minutes, and with every shred of her willpower, she gave Naruto a goodbye and promised she would visit him again when she had time. Naruto held her to that promise, with a cute, but loud exclamation of, "Dadbao," which made it 1,000 times harder to leave. But alas, she had returned to Rice. End flashback. Since then, Naruto's been getting occasional visits from the snake Sanin, who also conveniently had no clue that she was a missing nin. Despite all the thanks he gave her, he couldn't live in the apartment quite yet, as his training and scrounging around to make a Ryo or two had kept him busy. Not to mention, it was in the shinobi sector of town and he only got lucky because the guard that was on duty had taken a lunch break before the second person could take his shift. Anywho, it was through his busy schedule that Naruto picked up many hobbies and skills, like gardening from the nice lady at the botanical gardens and the farmers in the outskirts of Konoha. Since he was still technically a civvy, he had a free pass. Naruto also learned a few instruments to keep himself entertained, such as the piano, guitar, drums, ukulele, bass, and just to annoy people, the triangle and the kazoo. Getting back at hand, the Namakazes, too, were heading to the ninja academy to drop off their daughter, Naomi. Acting hastily, he hid behind a tree and observed from a distance. As he continued to track their movements, Naruto saw a bulge in Kushina's belly, assuming she was pregnant again. As if on cue, Minato confirmed his suspicions. Then when our Masumi is dropped off at the academy, I'll have to get the papers ready for our little girl, nay, Kushi-chan. Minato said, rubbing Kushina's belly. She slapped his arm, huffing before smiling and rubbing it as well. That's right, we're having you in a few months, and we'll have 2 daughters. She said, before stopping. Oh, I almost forgot. We need to get a new crib. Ooh, and a new bed for little Sayuki, and not to mention some toys. Kushina went off on a tangent about getting new things, while Minato nodded and wrote it down on a notepad. Nay, Ka-chan, 2-chan. Are we gonna use the room next to mine? Naomi chimed in, getting her parents' attention. Sure, if you want, Na-chan. Minato said, before his eyebrows creased a bit. Didn't someone live there before? He said slowly, trying to remember. Naomi and Kushina stopped and thought too, before shaking their heads. No, I don't think so, Koibito. Kushina said, scratching her scalp with a finger. Bah, I think it was a guest room anyway. People are always visiting after all, since you made the announcement of our second child. You even filled a few rooms with gifts. Minato said, laughing. Naomi and Kushina smiled and continued to walk towards the academy, not seeing a shaking blonde-hair boy, clenching his fists as something wet stained the ground. Naruto, sulking, made his way to the academy. As he followed the dirt path, he deviated and went towards the back, before using chakra to stick to the walls and walk up the side, onto the roof. There, he was meted with his brothers and sisters, waiting patiently. Well, for most of them. Naruto dodged a shoe as an angry trio of girls launched themselves at him as soon as his feet touched the roof. He didn't expect them to tackle him, seeing as he was near the edge of the roof. he was launched back and skidded on the floor before his head hit the door leading back into the building. Troublesome, Shikamaru said, observing with silent amusement. Choji and Sasuke didn't pay it any mind, as Choji was manning a grill and Sasuke occasionally released a fire jutsu to keep it going. Kiba and Shino were nearby, as Shino skillfully used his Kikaichu to remove the fleas from Akamaru. Meanwhile, Naruto groaned as he blearily tried to open his eyes, seeing heads of blonde, pink and blue matching the pouting faces that accompanied it. "You're late," Sakura said, getting off of Naruto as did Ino and Hinata. "You owe me a shoe, baka," Hinata said, narrowing her eyes to enforce the threat. Ino nodded, not really having any more to add. Naruto didn't say anything, his eyes downcast and a little did. The trio stopped and looked at him in concern, before crouching next to him. "What's wrong, Aniki?" The guys stopped their activities as they slowly approached Naruto, the same concern in their eyes. Naruto sighed, before hugging the three girls tightly. The girls instantly returned the gesture, signaling that it was pretty serious as the brothers wrapped their arms around Naruto, in a group hug. After a good minute, they let go as Naruto explained what he happened on his way to the academy. The girls and guys were furious, save for Sasuke who was silently scowling and Shikamaru who had a disappointed look in his eyes at his nation's leader. Needless to say, they were about to raise hell but Naruto stopped them, not wanting to cause a scene. Reluctant, but listening to their brother's words, they stopped before doing anything too rash. With a small smile, Naruto went to class. Naruto entered the classroom with his brothers and sisters and took a seat next to the window, as his brothers and sisters sat on his side of the room. He noticed a few civilians and a few sons and daughters of ninja he knew wave at him. He smiled, waving back until the teacher entered the room. A tanned male chunin with a horizontal scar on his nose and black hair entered the room, accompanied by a white-haired female chunin, each with a clipboard. "Hello, and welcome to Konoha's Ninja Academy. This is orientation, so don't worry, you won't be here long," the man said. "As you progress through the 4-year program, we as your homeroom teachers," the tanned male said, gesturing to the female, "will be your main instructors. Our goal is to help you get a leg up on the ninja program so that you may bring glory to Konoha and serve as our line of defense against foreign threats." The male concluded strongly. A few kids nodded, impressed by his words before the white-haired female Kunoichi walked to the front. "As my associate said, you are the people Konoha will turn to in a time of crisis," she continued, walking up and down the aisles. "Your duty is to protect civilians, and Konoha's livelihood. Do so with strength, but only with necessary force. Be tenacious, but also clear-minded." She walked back to the front of the class. "My name is Minami Tuji, and my friend here is Iruka Yumino. We will instruct you from here on out." The now identified Minami turned her head and nodded to Iruka, who switched places with her. He brought out a clipboard. "I will now do roll call. Say present when you hear your name." Just as he was about to start, the sliding door slammed open to a panting girl. "Sorry I'm late, Iruka ni. An orange-haired girl has arrived." Naruto pretended not to notice Naomi's late arrival, or her voice for the matter as Iruka ruffled her hair, before shooing her off. She went to a seat on the same level as Naruto and sat down. Naruto sighed before turning towards the window. "Barring that disruption, I will now begin roll call." Iruka began. As soon as the first name was called out, Naruto went into his mindscape. As time is different in the mindscape, a rate of an hour to a minute, Naruto had no problems tuning out the world. He opened his eyes as he saw his Ka-chan in all her glory. His Haim, in all of her eternal grace and beauty, snoring as she laid next to him on the bed. He blinked, confused, before remembering that his soul body was 20 years old, and his physical was 13. Shaking off the confusion, he summoned a clone and Kawaramide with it. As the clone laid helpless, he decided to explore his mindscape, seeing as the only true boundary he got to was a few meters deep into the forest. So he started on his adventure. On the real world, Naruto was looking out the window, his head turned away from all means of communication, including from Naomi, surprisingly. But, for the wrong reasons, of course. She detested him. Outright hatred. Her childhood hate for the blonde had manifested into something ugly, and he was all too wary of it, but not at the moment. Occasionally, Naomi would glare at Naruto's head and try to discreetly ruin his day, but to her shock, her jutsu would be countered by what seems to be a barrier. She growled, before turning back towards her replacement brother, Iruka. Since 30 seconds had elapsed in that brief instance with Naomi, 30 minutes had tired Naruto out. As it turned out, the forest would truly be an endless forest, until Naruto willed something to take its place, like an amusement park or a ramen stand. Sighing, Naruto stretched before closing his eyes. He felt a windy sensation on his body and opened his eyes again, to meet mismatched eyes of red and blue. Naruto blinked. Oni-kwan. The figure of a little girl launched herself at Naruto, sending him to the ground again, similarly to their initial encounter. Ah, Hitomi. Ni-san needs to breathe. Naruto struggled, trying and futilely to paw the overly affectionate child from killing him, who had a killer grip. As Hitomi tried to bury her face into Naruto's chest after not seeing him for so long, a slender, gloved hand grabbed the hem of her clothes, and elegantly lifted her to the taller figure's face. You know, you should stop doing that from now on, before you kill Naruto-sama. The soft voice said, walking closer to reveal the tanned beauty with yellow, blonde hair in a butler uniform. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, before smiling at the butler-maid person. Thanks a bunch, Setsuna-chan. Naruto thanked, before he was clocked in the head by the now-named Setsuna. BB Baka. Don't think I did this for your sake. She blushed, before huffing and turning her head as she crossed her arms. And don't say my first name, you haven't earned that right. Call me Yamamoto-san from now on. She finished, until Hitomi decided to hug Naruto again, not so rough now. Nay, Oni-chan. You promised that you'd take me and Suna-chan to the real world. I don't like this place, the shrine is so blue. She pouted adorably, which Naruto laughed at her expression before hugging her, placing her in his lap. Why don't we go today? I'll be done with the orientation for academy in an hour or so why not? Naruto proposed, as Hitomi cheered. Naruto looked at Setsuna and extended the same offer. So why not, Setsuna-chan? You, me and little Hitomi here. Naruto received a light punch to his chest. On the town for the day. Setsuna blushed up a storm. WHWHWW what are YYOU trying to pull here, Baka? She stuttered. Naruto decided to continue to tease her, lifting Hitomi and putting her to the side. He walked up to her, as she froze by the sudden proximity as he grabbed her slender hands. Naruto removed both gloves and placed them in his pockets, to feel the smooth, dainty tanned hands of the exotic beauty. She shivered in delight as he moved one hand to her cheek and looked her lovingly in the eyes. I want to spend the time with you, Setsuna-chan. She was too much in shock to properly reprimand him, so he continued. What's so bad with spending time with little ol' me? He leaned close and his mouth moved to her ear. Nay, Koibito, let's go out today. Our daughter wants us to. Naruto said, knowing what it did to her. KKKKKKKKK Koibito. DDD daughter. What? Her mind was racing a mile a minute as spirals replaced her eyes and her face was supported by both of her hands, a blush spreading across her tanned face. So come on, honey. Steam rose from her face. Darling. Her hands released her head as they hung limply. My wife. She couldn't take it anymore, as she fell backwards as if fainting. Naruto caught her and eased her slowly to the ground, much to Hitomi's interest, wondering what her Oni-chan was doing. Naruto went in for the kill. As little as Setsuna was still conscious, Naruto brushed a stray blonde hair away from her face and kissed her cheek. My beloved. He kissed her forehead this time, and she was out like a light. Naruto truly loved the butler maid, and her tsundere personality made it all the more appealing to tease her. He felt a tugging on his shirt. Oni-chan? Hitomi asked, tilting her head cutely. Naruto chuckled before scooping her into his arms and carried her like an airplane. Her giggles and screams of excitement filled the room as he slowly stopped, kissing her forehead. We'll spend the day today, precious Imouto. He said, making her smile a megawatt grin. But first, I have to return to the real world and get a few things done, alright? Naruto noticed her downtrodden expression but gave her a final hug. It won't be long, Hitomi. Wake up Setsuna-chan for the time being and tell her what's going to happen. Can you do that for me? With an, from his surrogate sister, he bounced over to Setsuna and started to shake her to get her to wake up. Naruto shook his head, a smile staining his lips as he vanished from the mindscape. As Naruto slowly returned, he shook himself awake and smiled, although the transition from a 20-year-old to a 13-year-old left him woozy for a few seconds. Going through reverse puberty felt like a pain and a half. Naomi Namikaze Uzumaki, Uruka said, looking at her. Hoi, she responded, smiling. Finally, Uruka read the final name on the list, his eyes widened. Naruto, Namikaze Uzumaki, he exclaimed, not knowing that the Hokage had another child, and older one at that. Most of the attention was turned to him as it was dead silent. Naruto rose his hand. Present, he said lazily, before looking out the window again. There was silence for a minute before Uruka broke the silence. Well then, that'll be all then. Uruka, still in disbelief. Minami too had a look of disbelief, but recovered faster than her compatriot. We'll now pass out these ID cards for you so you'll be allowed admission into the building. Can't have a stranger waltz in here, she said, passing out their respectable IDs. Soon after, the bell rung and they were dismissed. As the kids started to shuffle out of the door, the Konoha 9 exited the room in their own stylish way. Sasuke vanished in a fire shunshin, Choji and Sakura melted into the woodwork, Hinata and Kiba dived out of the window, Shikamaru walked into the shadows and disappeared, Ino and Shino disappeared in a scatter of flowers and insects, respectively, and Naruto vanished in a flash of light, stunning the remaining students who were unlucky in the light show. Naomi could only grit her teeth, missing her opportunity to get at Naruto. Naruto appeared at the park located near the academy, placed strategically for the ninjas to burn off their energy during recess or after school. It was sunset, as the orange color tainted the skies and clouds floated on by. There was another park on the other side of the school for civilians, but the ninja and civilian kids didn't care for that. Standing in the middle of the sand lot, he looked around him and noticed that no one was there, not noticing Naomi who just walked out the door. Deeming it safe, albeit he probably should have been more discreet, he started to do an incantation. O Kami, you who reign in Takamagahara, hear my call. My mind is thirsty, my soul is willful and my heart is aching for companionship, as I wish to summon the two beings inside of me. Naruto said, as a beam of light shot down from above him. Naruto didn't notice Naomi's eyes bugging out of her skull. Let my being be no longer lonely, as my heart is filled, my soul is happy and my mind is clear. I summon Yamamoto Setsuna, the willful sword of the Shinto Kamis, and Hitomi Akumu, the shroud of Yami, the dark shield that protects the world. I beg unto thee to release the two for all eternity. During the incantation, a black runic circle appeared under Naruto. As the beam of light and the dark rune met in neutrality, neither one overcoming the other. Soon, two vortexes appeared on either side of Naruto, and out stepped Hitomi and Setsuna. Although they were shorter, as they were tied to their master, Setsuna being the same age as Naruto and Hitomi at a ripe age of 8. The beam slowly disappeared as the dark rune melted into the ground and the vortexes closed itself. As soon as she stepped out, Hitomi rushed over to Naruto and started to jump in place. Ni-chan, 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 Ni-chan. Hitomi was garbed in a yellow blouse and a small cream-colored hat with a band near the rim, where an adorable little flower was pinned against it. Naruto smiled as he picked her up and placed her on his shoulders. Naruto glanced over to Setsuna and smiled, as she was dressed in a dark blue dress with a white shirt underneath, and long skirt that went to her ankles as well as some sandals. All in all, she looked like a civilian housewife, but with her dark skin and light hair, one could say different. I can't believe you dragged me out for this. She huffed, but silently enjoyed the sun. Naruto smiled and felt Hitomi tap his head. She's lying, Oni-chan. Hitomi whispered, making him chuckle. Since the Shroud of the Devil and the Uzu Manifest system were created in tandem, their human personalities couldn't hide emotions or lie from one another, so to be blunt, Hitomi acted as a lie detector against Setsuna. Naruto smiled and grabbed Setsuna's hand, startling her and blushing a bit as Naruto ran his thumb over the back of her hand. Now, let's be off. We have the night to ourselves. Naruto smiled beatifically, and with a hesitant nod, Setsuna and Naruto were off. Naruto felt Hitomi clamber off his shoulders and stepped in between them and grabbed the hands closest to her, smiling. Let's go, Ni-chan, Suna-ne-chan. She smiled. She started to use their hand as a type of swing and not even Setsuna could resist her innocence, giggling into her free hand. Naruto chuckled and the trio made their way into Konoha proper, missing the stunned expression on Naomi's face. Oni-chan, she tested in her mouth. Her heart ached as she noticed the little girl clutching onto Naruto's hand, dismissing Setsuna for the moment. She didn't the fact that her heart hurt when she looked, nor did she notice the frown that framed her face as she gazed at Naruto, laughing and having a good time. Oni-chan, she whispered, until she felt a pair of arms whisk her away. Masumi, how was school? Kushina said, giving her a hug as Minato ruffled her hair. And what were you doing behind the tree, Naomi? Ooh, do you already have a crush on someone? Minato teased, before mentally squashing that thought bug with an iron fist. He'll be damned if someone dated her daughter at this age. Naomi blushed before shaking her head violently. Minato and Kushina laughed as Minato gave her a piggyback ride, and followed Kushina into a hardware store for furniture for their next daughter. Naomi looked behind her, seeing the retreating form of her brother, and to her surprise, felt something wet on her face. I'm crying, she thought as she brought a hand to her cheek. Sure enough, she was as she quickly used her sleeve to wipe it off. Just an average day in Konoha. And that's that. The poll results are in. Apparently a lot of you wanted a harem, so a harem you shall have. The harem members are Naruto, Kagaya, Makoto, Anko, Kurenai, Yamamoto Setsuna, and lastly, Naomi. I decided on doing 5, as that was the drop-off point in terms of votes. The other choices had a significant gap between these 5, so I cut it off there. However, I'm adding Yamamoto Setsuna as a harem member, because why not? Getting to that, Yamamoto Setsuna's name was decided based that she is a sword in her default form, and I was playing Devil May Cry 3 again and took the name of Virgil's katana because it's bad, and just made it feminine. She's also based off of Nikumi, from Shokugeki no Soma, as a few of you decided that, and I quote, she looks aight. Yes. Hitomi Akumu's name was decided based on a friend's suggestion, and the character she was based off of is Hasegawa Kabato from Boku wa Tomodachi ga Sukunai, courtesy from user Malbatoris for the suggestion. Thanks for that. Also, I recommend checking out a few stories that are my personal favorite. To Love, Ruto, by Drake Wilson. It's a To Love Ru crossover with Naruto. I like the perverted Kushina he has going on, like it's really good. The Promise of a Lifetime, a Nizuka Naruto crossover by Objection 234. Really good, with Tsugumi x Naruto as the main pairing. Really recommend it.